Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Okay, so this episode is the next part of Green Day and Oasis, and it's the second episode of it, and it does showcase the fight between Giorno and Cioccolata. It is the main part of the episode where we finally get to see them finally face off, and Cioccolata has a couple of interesting techniques that I'll get into that do make sense for his background, but I'll get into those. And also, more importantly, this episode is very notable for a very big reason at the end, and I'll also get into that. But in any case, it ends with it actually starts with Giorno and Mista going off to go fight Cioccolata, since now his helicopter has been pinned in place by what is now a large tree, and of course Bucciardi lets him go so he can deal with Secco personally. But Secco then proceeds to point out that after they leave, that he was going to go after Bucciardi first regardless, and then proceeds to explain how he's very annoyed about the fact that he clearly has been something is very clearly is going on with his body and doesn't know what's going on. But he also points out that obviously he knows that he's still very pissed off about the fact that Bruno hit him in the face very sneakily, and points out that was very clever. But also, he doesn't really know the correct word for clever, so he says cleaver and a couple of other derivatives thereof before Bucciardi finally corrects him. And of course, this only causes Secco to become annoyed, because obviously he doesn't like the fact that Bucciardi is correcting him and calls him out for being a grammar teacher. And then remembers that he needs to actually film the whole thing where he films Bucciardi's look of despair on his face. And proceeds to pull a camera out of Oasis's pocket, which he keeps on him. Apparently, Oasis has pockets. It's just an ability that it has, and it makes sense considering it's an outfit. But of course, while Secco is distracted and trying to make his camera work, Bucciardi decides to go in and sucker punch him while he's distracted, but is then thrown for a loop when Secco manages to follow up with a kick and quickly knock him away. And of course, Bucciardi quickly realizes that Secco is very fast, and quickly realizes that he may be in trouble. While Secco points out that he doesn't even need to go on the ground to actually defeat Bucciardi, pointing out that obviously his Oasis is a lot faster and he'll never be able to keep up. And sure enough, what we find out is that he's not lying. He quickly lays a smackdown on Bruno, who is just barely able to defend himself. And Bruno quickly figures out why he's so fast. As it turns out, and this is kind of a hidden ability of Oasis, but obviously Oasis liquefies ground when it touches it, and Secco uses that to actually enhance his punches. As Bucciardi describes, it's very similar to a boxer using the ropes to enhance their punches to fight back against somebody, but of course, it's a very similar concept. He's using the liquefied ground as a trampoline as ropes to just kind of enhance his punches and make them a lot faster. And Bucciardi quickly realizes that he's in trouble and that he needs to get away. And sure enough, when Oasis then goes to try and land a punch, Bucciardi then proceeds to use sticky fingers to actually break apart the piece of ground that he was sitting on to actually unzip himself and just go down to a lower elevation so that Secco can't hurt him anymore. And Secco then takes a moment to actually film Bucciardi as well, and points out that the theory about how Cioccolata's stand should be working on him isn't. And of course points out that there's obviously a very obvious problem, and that Cioccolata's stand should be working on every single living thing in the area. And points out that if Bucciardi isn't going to succumb to Cioccolata's mold, then obviously he's going to have to finish him off by beating him into a pulp until there's nothing left to beat. And of course the two then proceed to run off deeper into the city to actually go and fight. We don't actually see any of that. That happens completely off screen, but we do find out at the end of the episode that is indeed what happens. But in any case, meanwhile, Giorno and Mista have actually successfully gotten to the top of the building where Cioccolata is currently being held by a tree, And Cioccolata is trying to escape, pointing out that obviously it's a tree. He has to get away from it, or it'll just infect it, or it'll just kind of grow. But he also points out that he knows about Giorno's ability. He explains how Giorno's a newbie. He knows about the fact that his ability can create life, and points out that obviously all he really needs to do to get away is to lower his elevation so that the tree that's currently holding him and his helicopter will actually start to decay. And of course he immediately goes to do that, but discovers that he can't actually move all that much, and the tree's just kind of locking him in place. And of course Giorno points out that now that of course that is exactly what he was planning. The tree had actually grown into full maturity and is now completely holding the helicopter in place. And with that, Giorno then points out that now that he can't move, they're going to have to go in after him. But of course, Mista points out that isn't necessary because he has Sex Pistols, and he points out that it's well within his range now, so he can more than easily find Cioccolata and finish him off with Sex Pistols. And sure enough, fires 5 of the 6 Sex Pistols into the helicopter, telling them to aim for the head. And of course, they immediately go into the helicopter and break into the windows, but they quickly find out that Cioccolata isn't in there for some reason. They can't find him. Which of course causes them to all causes Mista to immediately to kind of panic a little bit, and especially after number 5 tells them what's going on. But of course they don't know what's going, and of course they have no idea what exactly is happening. And of course number 1 is looking around trying to figure out why there is in fact no Cioccolata in the helicopter, but does point out that he should be in there. But then he notes that 3 and 4 wind up getting injured, and that 2 and 3 wind up getting injured, and they wind up dying, and they wind up being badly injured. And of course this of course causes number 1 to panic, because obviously he points out every stand should have at least 1 power. So he doesn't fully understand how this ability is actually working. He doesn't fully understand how this person is actually managing to evade them. And of course, we then see 6 and 7 who are also badly injured, and they tell number 1 to run. But by that point, it's actually too late, and Cioccolata winds up getting them all. And of course, this actually winds up having a very adverse effect on Mista, since most of his Sex Pistols wind up being incapacitated except for number 5, and Mista immediately collapses. And of course, number 5 is very panicked about the fact that Mista won't wake up, and points out that he needs to go in and get his fellow Sex Pistols out so that they can actually revive Mista. But of course, Giorno points out that doesn't seem like it's going to be a possibility, pointing out that obviously Mista can't really recall his stand, because it seems like Cioccolata is holding the stands hostage so that they can't actually get back to their user. And Bruno and Giorno points out that that's a very obvious problem that they are going to need to overcome, because obviously, because as he explains, his ability only works if the stand has actually been recalled by the user. That because it's their spiritual energy. It doesn't work if their spiritual energy is gone, because of how the gold experience is established to work. And he does proceed to explain that in order to actually get Mista back into full health, he needs to actually go and find Cioccolata and finish him off personally, and pointing out that he should have been upfront and close and confrontational from the get-go. And with that, he then proceeds to climb up onto the tree to get to the helicopter, while telling Sex Pistol number 5 to stay there. But Mista gives him an alternate order, telling him to support Giorno, even though he himself can't actually move, and then proceeds to hand Sex Pistols number 5 a bullet, and tells him to support Giorno with it. And Sex Pistols agrees, and keeping his distance from the helicopter, he then proceeds to follow Giorno up. And of course, Giorno then proceeds to climb up to the helicopter, and starts looking around to figure out what exactly is going on. But then he notices Cioccolata's surgical tools, and notably they've been used. They're now covered in blood. And of course, Giorno, who now realizing that Cioccolata is a surgeon, because we as an audience knew, but Giorno did not, quickly realizes that there seems to be something that may in fact have some sort of impact on how Cioccolata is operating, and of course, it's at this point where Sex Pistols #1, and also now badly injured, crawls into the cockpit of the helicopter, and proceeds and tells Giorno to look out. And sure enough, what we see is that Cioccolata has actually kind of cut himself into pieces, and then proceeds to sucker punch Giorno. And of course he does punch Giorno with his fist, and what we find out is that he's basically just a torso and an arm. Most of his body is just gone. But of course Giorno has no idea how Cioccolata is doing this, but does proceed to fight him off, and then wonders what the hell he's looking at as Cioccolata escapes back into the helicopter. But then he doesn't really have much time to figure out what's going on because as it turns out, Cioccolata's other severed arm then proceeds to punch Giorno and tries to push him off the plane. And of course, it's at this point where Cioccolata then proceeds to explain what his ability actually is, and proceeds to explain how he's doing this effect. And what we find out is that obviously spending many years as a surgeon performing malpractice on purpose has made Cioccolata very informed about which pieces of the body he can sever and cut off without dying. And to add to that, his Green Day enables him to actually clog up any sort of vital organs or whatever that would otherwise leak out and leak out all their blood and whatever, so that he can just keep himself mobile when he should be unable to move. So he just stuffs himself full of his old mold and just uses that to puppeteer his severed limbs around. And also notes that Giorno is being pushed out of the plane by his severed arm, that Giorno should know better than to try and climb back up, but pointing out that he's already won. But also proceeds to point out that he believes that there are two types of beliefs that you are blessed. One is, of course, when you believe you're going to win and climb back, and Giorno demonstrates that first one by showing that he may have the upper hand by actually pinning Cioccolata's helicopter in place with a tree, using several missed bullets. While at the same time, Cioccolata points out that the other time is when they're looking down on somebody with despair as they're about to lose. And proceeds to point out that obviously he believes the latter one is superior because that's what he believes in. That's what he personally believes in. But and of course, Giorno then proceeds to actually climb back up into the helicopter. But Cioccolata then knocks him away. Then proceeds to knock him away with his severed leg, telling him that he should have prepared for that. Pointing out that obviously he didn't know where his severed leg was. Giorno should have known that there would have been more limbs to contend with. And of course, he then proceeds to point out that all he has to do is now push Giorno into range of his mold, and then Giorno will start molding up and start dying that way. And does point out that all he needs to do is actually find a way to defeat Giorno, and point out that once he's found a way to finally knock Giorno free of the helicopter, that he'll have finally won. And it's at this point where he actually winds up stitching himself back up and points out that that now he all he needs to do is just finish off Giorno so that he can't fight back. And sure enough, he then proceeds to summon Green Day and points out that he now needs to just knock Giorno, that all he needs to do is just keep Giorno from getting back onto the helicopter, and proceeds to deliver a series of blows to Giorno, which does wind up sending him flying free from the helicopter despite Giorno's best efforts of trying to climb onto it. And Cioccolata then gloats that he's won, pointing out that obviously he points out that Giorno obviously was never going to be able to get back onto the helicopter because Cioccolata wouldn't allow him, and points out that once he hit the ground, the mold will have completely overtaken him and he'll have won. But it's at this point where Sex Pistols #5 then uses the bullet that Mista gave him and proceeds to kick it through Giorno's hand, who then proceeds to use gold experience to create a branch for him to grab onto and climb back onto the helicopter with. And of course Giorno points out that was very, very welcome, and that he's up, and that now he has a way to get back onto the helicopter, and proceeds to kind of use the branch as a tightrope to get back to the helicopter. But of course, Cioccolata isn't even remotely disturbed by this, pointing out that obviously he's still very much won, and then proceeds to explain why, pointing out that obviously the branch is a living thing, and Cioccolata's mold it affects any living thing. So of course, Cioccolata then proceeds to put the helicopter into a nosedive, which, of course, doesn't move the helicopter since obviously it's pinned in place by a tree, but it does cause the branch that Giorno is currently using to cling onto the front of the helicopter to slowly make its way. To slowly creep up the mold and cause Giorno to start falling again. And of course, Cioccolata once again gloats, pointing out that he's won, and now that Giorno is no longer going to be able to be defeated. But what we quickly find out is that a piece of the branch that actually winds up hitting the rotors of the helicopter. We see this, and it winds up hitting Cioccolata in the face. And of course, what Giorno explains is that he was winning the entire time. He then proceeds to explain how he knew the mold was going to affect how the bullet that had since turned back into a bullet because of course Green Day's mold caused it to turn back into a bullet because it's now broken into a piece, and of course explains that now the piece of branch that hit Cioccolata came bounced back into him, that it's just a piece of wood now. It's no longer has any sort of effect or any sort of life-giving properties. It's just a piece of wood. And of course, it then proceeds to turn back into a bullet once it's damaged, and proceeds to incapacitate Cioccolata, and of course, Giorno then proceeds to point out that now that he's actually used that strategy to actually take out Cioccolata, that he's successfully won and successfully incapacitated him. And of course, Cioccolata then proceeds to fall out of his helicopter and onto the tree below it, and of course, while Giorno then proceeds to return back to the building, now mostly safe. But of course, Sex Pistols number 5 does point out that obviously Giorno won. He beat Cioccolata, and does point out that obviously now all they have to do is revive Mista, and then they'll be fine. But Giorno isn't so sure, and he merely tells Sex Pistols number 5 to move out of his way, and then proceeds to lay down some smack talk on what is seemingly Cioccolata's lifeless body. And what we find out is that he very much believes that Cioccolata is very much alive, because obviously he knows what can be injured or severed without being injured, and obviously he knows that taking a bullet, that the way he took a bullet, he is probably not going to kill him. And also Giorno does proceed to point out that he seems like that Cioccolata is actually playing dead, so that he can sneak away when Giorno proceeds to climb up there and finish him off with Green Day. And of course, Giorno does proceed to point out that it is indeed a viable strategy, because obviously Giorno then proceeds to cite that he has various injuries that are probably going to kill him if he or make him, or at least slow him down, and does proceed to point out that he doesn't even know if he can climb up to the top of the building, and does point out that if he isn't able to actually climb up, then Cioccolata is going to win. But he does point out that if Cioccolata doesn't move while he's up there, that he will actually offer Cioccolata a swift mercy. And of course, when he then proceeds to eye Cioccolata for several minutes, who doesn't move, and Giorno decides that it's probably fine and proceeds to climb up, only for Cioccolata to reveal that he was in fact playing dead, and reveals that while Giorno was talking, he had actually used Green Day's ability and as well as his own surgical knowledge to once again sever one of his arms off to go and take Mista hostage, and proceeds to tell him that obviously he's not going. Then obviously now, if Giorno takes one more step, he's going to finish off Mista, and then proceed to kill everybody inside the turtle, which currently consists of Narancha and Shirish. But and of course declares that now that because Giorno spent all of this time gabbing, that he's finally won. But then a large stag beetle proceeds to emerge from Cioccolata's head, and Giorno explains that was part of his plan as well. Explaining that when it bounced out, that when the piece of wood wound up bouncing off, he actually wound up imbuing it with some of Gold Experience's life energy, and that all he was doing was buying time so that it would turn back into a stag beetle, and proceed to actually just emerge from Cioccolata's head. And of course, Cioccolata is very flabbergasted about all this, pointing out that obviously Giorno said he would go easy on him, and of course he has severe brain damage at this point because a stag beetle just came out of his head. Of course, he's just gonna have a bit of brain damage, but he's barely able to form a sentence, and he does explain that Giorno said he would take it easy on him if he didn't move. But of course, Giorno points out that he was lying, since obviously obviously nobody is going to spare a piece of shit like Cioccolata, and then proceeds to lay down one of the best SmackDowns in the whole series. This is actually the longest SmackDown in the series, actually. Second highest would have been the fight between Star Platinum and Steely Dan. Yeah, this is the longest fight in the series, where Giorno then proceeds to lay down a 30-second SmackDown, or 7 pages in the manga, I should mention. This goes on for several pages, 2 front to back, and then a final one. But Giorno just proceeds to lay down a 30-second barrage of attacks with gold experience against Cioccolata. And it is one of the most glorious things. It is one of the best moments in the series, where he just lays down the SmackDown against this guy who's obviously a very big piece of shit. He needs to be dealt with. But of course they do that in one of the most glorious ways possible. And of course he then proceeds to also offer up several of his father's stand cries. Obviously it's established that Dio is maybe his father or something. It's very clear that it's been established that Dio gave birth to Dio slept with a woman. She gave birth to him. So yeah, this is just a display of all his various stand cries, where obviously he shouts "Muda Muda" like his father, but also shouts "Ri" as well, and it's just really glorious. But in any case, with that, he then proceeds to defeat Cioccolata, who then proceeds to fall off of the helicopter and into a trash compactor at the back of a garbage truck, which, as we find out, is a burn truck that collects trash every Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And Giorno, now satisfied with the fact that he's now defeated Cioccolata, then proceeds to go back to Mista and heal him up, and because now Mista has since recovered, because now his stands are no longer incapacitated, and now able to recall his stands. He's now able to finally recover. But of course, it's at this point where Giorno notices that there's actually a phone laying on the ground next to Mista, and he quickly realizes it's Cioccolata's phone, since neither he or Mista recognize it, and notably, it seems like somebody's calling it, and of course, Giorno quickly realizes that he seems to have been talking with somebody during their battle, and is curious as to who it could have been, But of course, what we quickly find out is that it was in fact Secco. Secco is currently trying to call Cioccolata, and obviously since Cioccolata is now dead, he's not getting an answer. But he eventually discovers that he has 2 voicemails, but and initially he doesn't remember what it means to actually get voicemails. He sees the image. He sees the image on his phone. He doesn't fully understand what the voicemail is, but eventually realizes, oh, this is a voicemail. I need to listen to this, and he then proceeds to pick up the phone, and the first voicemail is very much the typical dynamic that they normally display, where Cioccolata points out that obviously he's going to be fighting Giorno in a couple of minutes, and does tell him that he's being a very good boy for going off to go fight Bruciardi on his own and finishing him off, and does tell him that once he's done with that, he will give him back rubs and sugar cubes. And also there's it's just a really cute thing where Secco is interacting with the voicemail as if it's Cioccolata, and Cioccolata very much records it as if he's talking to Secco directly. So the 2 of them are kind of interacting while also not interacting, and of course it's just a really fun dynamic. However, the second voicemail is a completely different tone to it, and of course what we find out is that this is Cioccolata recording his final thoughts to Secco, revealing in his final moments that in his belief about how the strong are supposed to guide over the weak, or rather that the strong are supposed to guide over all others. And does explain his interest in his belief that he's going to finally be able to surpass the boss in this fight. And points out that obviously he doesn't know if he'll actually win, but does point out that no matter what, Secco needs to actually finish it off, and then tells Secco that he loves him, and then proceeds to hang up and ends the voicemail. And Secco, hearing all this, is understandably very disturbed, because he quickly realizes that this is in fact Cioccolata's last message to him, and then proceeds to kind of fly into a bit of a rage. And And of course, it's at this point where Bucciardi has since distanced himself immensely from where they were originally fighting in Rome. And points out that obviously he feels like he's gotten quite the distance away from Secco, pointing out that he probably isn't going to have to deal with him anymore. But as it turns out, he didn't realize that Secco had actually followed him and is currently sitting underneath him and proceeds to emerge from the ground as he's talking about this. Meanwhile, their unnamed ally, who we see but not exactly clearly, although he does look familiar. He's then revealed to actually have been spying from the whole time. And what we find out is that he's wheelchair bound and missing an eye. That's really the only thing we see of him. But that's really all we see. We don't see much else of him. I mean, he has a similar looking haircut, but to somebody else that we've seen before. Specifically Polnareff. He looks a little bit like Polnareff with his haircut, but he otherwise doesn't. His face is covered, but he looks a little bit like Polnareff, a little bit. And I'm curious as if that is indeed who that is, because obviously we haven't seen Polnareff in a while. If it is indeed him, it could be interesting. We haven't really seen him in a while, so I was curious as if he would actually come back or not. And I'm hoping that's who this is. I don't know. But it looks like him, but I'm not entirely 100%. But if it is indeed him, then that does beg the question of, if it is indeed Polnareff, why is he wheelchair bound? Why is he missing an eye? Well, those are very much questions that the series would have to answer if that is indeed who that is. I'm not 100%. I don't know if it's actually him, but it looks like him, so that's who I'm choosing to believe it is. But the episode where we quote unquote meet this mysterious ally does also establish that he knows how stands work. So clearly he is indeed a stand user. I'm just curious now. This feels like somebody we've met before, but I'm not 100%. But in case, this fight against Cioccolata was absolutely amazing. Obviously, there's the whole thing where Giorno winds up finishing him off with the longest stand barrage in the series, and which lasts 7 pages in the manga, and a whole 30 seconds in the anime, possibly closer to a minute. I don't know, but it is one of the longest fight in the series, and obviously Cioccolata very much deserved to be beaten the shit out of. But it was indeed a fun episode where we finally see Cioccolata finished off and kind of meet his maker. So it is kind of a fun little story. But we still have the actual fight with Secco and Oasis to go. So yeah, I'm interested to see how that's going to go. But for the time being, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this review, what did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that are my way of saying thanks. So be sure to check those out, and the link is down in the description. And finally, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!